Namaste and welcome to another edition of Meet the Author. Today we have a special guest, a journalist who has a vast editorial experience and now trying his hand into writing. Author who came up with the first book on the great narration about Dharma, and not just about Dharma, but Dharma, democracy and diplomacy in the way Bharat is rising. And now he has come up with this very important work called Eminent Distorians, Twists and Truths in Bharat's History. So I welcome Utpal Kumar. Utpal ji, very welcome to the show and hearty congratulations. In last 2-3 years, you have come up with a journalist coming with a book. It's always a pleasure with such an academic rigor. First come first. There's a lot of controversy about Aurangzeb these days, and people are and you also have dealt with Aurangzeb in detail in your book, and there have been various attempts to whitewash the bigotry and the brutalities of Aurangzeb by many. And there are, different interpretations and variations about the way Aurangzeb is perceived and projected, not just people like Andrei Trushke and Irfan Habib, but even, many other historians who thought that it was just, another kind of game or rule of the game that used to be played that time. So, as you have remarked, one has to be incredibly ignorant, ideologically jaundiced, or worse, jealously fundamentalist to do so. You are talking about defending Aurangzeb as a tough job. For there is more than enough evidence left by the Mughals, or for that matter, Aurangzeb himself,
yes,
proudly proclaiming their acts of violence and vandalism, what can be, considered and in fact should be called as iconoclasm.
absolutely.
So, how do you see this entire debate, and why, this debate is still haunting, Indian popular psyche?
Sir, it's incredible, that we're still debating that whether Aurangzeb was secular or whether he was a bigot of the first order. Because and I'm thankful to Aurangzeb and people who were chronicling the event at that time. Had they not done so, today Aurangzeb would have been projected as the most secular, most ruler who was who lived like a common person. But unfortunately for them, for the people I call them eminent historians, there are enough evidences recorded by Muslim writers and also through the firmans of Aurangzeb himself, where they pompously claimed what they were doing, and they thought they were doing the noble work by destroying temples, by imposing jizya, or by imposing taxes on the pilgrims and all these things. So for them, that was they thought it's a good thing they're doing, the righteous thing they're doing. So they pompously recorded everything, every record of vandalism and violence which they committed on the.
No, even criminal justice system. Criminal justice system was dependent on your faith and religion.
Absolutely, yeah. So everything they recorded and very in elaborate manner they recorded, and because of that today we are the historians are unable to cancel find out in true sense of the word. For instance, Aurangzeb, before starting any campaign against Hindus, he would issue farmans that he's going to do that. The farmans are already there. I mean, you can't deny that. It's written with seal of for Emperor Aurangzeb. So all these things are there. But unfortunately, what has happened is that, and I'll tell you that here at least colonial historians were far better than our own historians. They actually wrote what they saw, what they observed. post-independence, in our eagerness to create a kind of this frame of Ganga Jamni Tehzeeb. And I don't know when Yamuna became Muslim symbolism. I don't know, because Yamuna is as Hindu as Ganga is. But
and after meeting Ganga, it remains Ganga.
It remains Ganga. It's absolutely. So for the heck of it, so for Ganga Jamni Tehzeeb, they wanted to create an equivalence. So then for that reason, they thought that if we kind of demonize Aurangzeb, we will put today's Muslim in the line of fire, which again is like, you are questioning today's Muslim for the act of Aurangzeb. I have a problem with that also. And let fact be fact. What Jadna Sarkar used to very famously say, that facts are sacrosanct. And facts should be presented whether we like or dislike it. And the fact is that Aurangzeb was a fanatic, he was a bigot. Of the first order, if he was living, if his daily life was very, very austere, it was not because he was a good person, because he was a fanatic Islamist and he wanted to live like the way Prophet Muhammad Sahib used to live. So his idea was that, and we should see it that way. And also, just because if Hitler was a vegetarian, we don't start loving everything what Hitler did, and we should have that much of sense and sensibility when we judge Aurangzeb. Aurangzeb has done enough harm to the country, and there are enough if you have to choose heroes in the Muslim community, for example, it's better to choose Das Siko if you have to. You don't have to defend Aurangzeb, which is indefensible. So that's what I see.
Last week I was hosting Yogi Adityanath in one of our programs in Uttar Pradesh, Lucknow, and he said whether you want to name your child Aurangzeb, better you ask Shah Jahan. What he did to his father. So do we really want this kind of a son?
Right. And this also, so like somebody, a famous actor has kept his son's name Temur. There's also a sense of how lack of history you understand. A sense of history is lacking there. But some of them are very deliberate. Like someone like Audrey Tuske. See, her idea of defending Aurangzeb is that since Aurangzeb kept so many Hindus in the nobility, and that's why he was secular. By that stretch of imagination, even Hitler was a pro-Jew. He kept a lot of Jews in his own army. And he used to use that same Jews to kill other Jews. And that's exactly what Aurangzeb did. If you see Aurangzeb's period, there are two phases. The first phase, from 1657 till 1678, the number of Hindu nobility was much less. When he started fighting the Marathas, the numbers increased multifold, and the reason was that he wanted to use Hindus to fight Hindus.
That's why that later with Chhatrapati Shivaji writing to Mirza Raja Jai Singh becomes very, very important, where he's giving him a call as a Hindu. You can be a leader and I can follow you, but you stop serving. But Utpalji, I have very serious question. You mentioned about present day Muslims being targeted, this fear. But today we are actually seeing that there are some groups, fundamentalist groups, and even some political leaders who are eulogizing Aurangzeb. In Maharashtra, we are seeing, there is a sort of competition in un-Islamic idea of Qabr and Mazar is being celebrated, and Chadar is being offered. But, when we talk about sense of history, in caste terms, we are very, very clear and open about its discussion. We want to, you have dealt with the caste issue also in very detail, and I've gone through it. But, even if there are certain things that are wrong that had happened over the period of time, we are very open about it. We call it social justice. When it comes to the religious thing, my historical records say that most of the Muslims in present-day India are actually victims of people like Aurangzeb, and they are not inheritors. So, isn't your, eminent Distorians have done injustice to present-day Muslims by not telling them that you are a victim of Baburs and Aurangzeb and Gauris and Ghaznis and not their followers?
Absolutely, sir. In fact, you see, Pakistan is a perfect example of that. And you know that who is the first citizen of Pakistan, and you will be shocked to know it's Muhammad bin Qasim, the person who invaded Sindh in 712 AD and who would have killed, maimed, raped the ancestor of today's people of Pakistan. And he is called the first citizen of Pakistan. This is the idea of history, how it gets distorted. Also, it has something to do with conversion. Conversion blocks your mind, and it kind of makes you rootless. But here the role of historians, the so-called historians, is also very critical. They actually do the cover fire for most of it. You see, for instance, the idea of Pakistan, it was first legitimized by the same historians in the name of self-determination, and so they create the field for that. First, they will give the academic intellectual legitimacy to the idea, and that's what happens. Aurangzeb also, it is the same people who legitimize and say, "Oh no, Aurangzeb was good. It was not bad." They will invent some stories about what happened about the temple in Bharat. There was priest doing some wrong act, and that's why Aurangzeb had to come and defend it. So, and they know basis of all these things.
Or Jats revolted, and that's why he had to invade Mathura.
So actually, they turn around everything. So what happened as a result of his persecution? He turned around and said, "Oh no, they revolted, that's why they went act." So they actually do everything, and they try to rationalize it. Now, coming to the question you asked about comparison between Aurangzeb and today's Muslim, it's very wrong to do that. And I think it's just time that that these people should realize that if you try to hide historical facts, the wound will always remain. Look, for example, in the 50s we celebrated a film like Mughal Azam. Today we have a film called Chhawa. Why? Because for 50 years or 70 years, you try to cover up and say everything is good. But you can't. See, people's memory is very strong. It always remains. Some, like Parathas will always remember what has happened to Sambhaji. And that's coming out in a very proportion. Today, the entire country is talking about Aurangzeb precisely for that reason, because for 70 years we didn't talk about that. And we need to talk about it. And it's high time that we need to be very, and we also need to be logical. That you see, the truth is important. First, truth has to come, and then we should talk about reconciliation. These historians, they talk about reconciliation first, and they say that, okay, truth can be compromised. That doesn't happen. And when you try to do that, the film like Chhawa will come up, and people will be getting
reconciliation is also very unjust manner. Yeah. You one side should forget everything, and the other side will continue with the this bigotry and the fundamentalism.
Exactly.
That is
the first truth has to be told. What has ever happened, good, bad, ugly, has to be put on the table, and then only once that is sorted, then we'll talk about reconciliation. That's the truth part is completely hidden, and people talk about let's reconcile, and let's all be everything was so good in the past. Everything was not good.
Now let us come to the basic idea and the title of the book. I've read Eminent Distorians also.
Yes.
And Eminent Distorians by Arun Shourie was many people would put him, in different boxes today after his book on Savarkar and Dutwa, and the way he's positioning himself on various issues. But it was a landmark work exposing, this. But what was your thinking behind this? In fact, 3 years back, I'm the one who used this term, Distorian, in one of my writings also.
Right.
But what was your idea of, using this term and,
So I'll be very honest that, this is truly inspired by what Arun Shourie has written in his work. And it inspires a whole generation of people, if not more. And but what I thought that, Arun Shourie, when he wrote in 1998 that book, his book was also largely the critique of what left had done. And I don't blame, because, at that time, the leftist ecosystem was so overwhelming. And there were no social media to fight them.
No, it focuses more on the way the economics and intellectual fraud that they have done through the institutions like ICHR.
Exactly. So it is largely the critique of that. So what I try to, I think this last 25 years, we have become more confident about ourselves. So the people he called the eminent historians, today we know that they were not historians, they were historians. So the 2.5 decades of confidence is reflective, and I can say, no, you are not historians, you were historians, and let's call them historians. So they deliberately did. See, if you distort by ignorance, I can understand. But, as I mentioned in many instances in the book, it was done deliberately. They deliberately tried to distort the country for the ideological reason. And ideological reason is very simple. That a Marxist is first a Marxist activist, cardholder, then he is a historian. So his first loyalty for a Marxist or communist is communism, rather than the historical calling. So and that's what they try to do. They first try to fit in the Marxist worldview. And for Marxists, capture of power is the paramount thing. Capture of power of the state.
Taking over the state.
So this book, or any book they write, or anything they do in life, Their first goal is to push forward the ideas of communism. And you read history, the history is projected that way. For example, they will say that, oh, Gupta period was not a golden period. Genja's famous line is that, where he says, oh, the golden period lied in the future. Now, read that line and read what communist ideology talks about in future. You say that there is commonality between the two. And that's what, that has been a failing about, the historians. That they never acted like a historian. They always wanted to act like a communist card holder. Propagandists. And that's why I thought it's time that we call them historians.
And see, but what you have started with, and I truly believe that has to be the starting point. Without talking about Saraswati, you cannot talk about. And the real distortion started, and as you mentioned, British historians may be having their own perspective. They were seeing Indian reality from the European prism.
Exactly.
But they were very clear about what they are writing, about the facts. Their interpretation of history may be, from the European prism.
Absolutely.
But what has happened post-independent period? And you start your first chapter with by quoting Nira Chaudhary and the way post-independent, historians have seen, and perhaps they were trying to follow what Marx had written about India, that India has no history of its own, if at all. It is a history of incessant invasions by outsiders. So, how do you see this distortion of Saraswati Sindhu civilization, and where did it really go wrong, this differentiating Harappa from the Vedic civilization?
So for me, this the Saraswati issue, or rather say the Aryan invasion migration theory, is the mother of all historical scams. And I always believe that that is the basis from where they actually distorted, and not just distorted but divided India into pieces, whether in the name of north-south, tribal, non-tribal, women issue, like they will project this Sanatan tradition is anti-women, whether the truth is just opposite. There is no other tradition which is as pro-women as Sanatan tradition is.
The only tradition which has the idea of feminine divinity.
Absolutely. So and the basis of that is this divide they created between so-called Harappa and the Vedic people. The reality is that they were not two; they were just one. And today we know, most of these Harappan sites are found on the course of course of Saraswati, much, in fact, 2-3 times more than what they are found on the bank of Indus. So we know that it happened, and Saraswati, now the science says that, and we can't deny that it died almost around 1900 BC. If it dies around that time, how can Vedic period come 400 years later and start praying about Saraswati and calling it, oh, you are the biggest and mightiest of the rivers and everything? So when that, I'm sure they were not high on opium and everything. But not just that. I think this entire theory, sir, I believe is lacks a basic common sense also. Like common sense about few things which we observe, like language, for instance. Language is a very sticky thing. Language we never leave. Language, we may get converted, but also language is the only thing which remains with us. In this case, it's a unique that Harappan people, despite being civilizedly much more advanced, modern, sophisticated people, urban people, they left their language overnight for few Aryans coming. Now, Rabindranath Thapar and people now, they say that there's so few people came from the West Asia that they know archaeological evidence, because they know evidence. So what they say, there's few people came. So few Aryans came. And who were the Aryans? They were nomads, illiterate, warlike people. So these people, and another irony is that these people had the most sophisticated language called Sanskrit. Look at the irony. All irony you'll find in this entire theory. So they were carrying the most sophisticated language. They were very few, but they could overwhelm the world's largest civilization, which was in the Saraswati civilization. They overwhelmed it. Not just overwhelmed it, these people were happily took the language of the invaders. And it's never happened in the history. Today, Bangladesh, despite being Islamist, talks in Bangla. You see Pakistani talking Punjab. So language, Iranians talking Iran, despite things. But this is the only instance where, people just overnight change.
And as you know, some of the historians, one of the, and I generally don't call it history. I would like to call it itihasa. Itihasa literally means as it happened.
Yes.
History is always a narrative.
Yes.
History is always an interpretation. But itihasa is, you see, try to find out what has happened. Now, and some of the historians, one of the itihaskar in Pune, I was discussing with him, and he asked me one funny question. People always talk about Aryan came from outside, Indian came from outside. And people staying here, always say that, they came from outside. But somebody should claim that they went from our land, they went from us, they went from here. And there is nobody in the world. So where did they come?
And in fact, there is another unique thing, and not just that, sir. Any community which migrates any time, and it might be like, I remember my grandfather telling me that his grandfather migrated to, today we live in Katihari, northeast Bihar. They said we were in Bhojpur. Some 6-7 generations back, we came from Bhojpur area to this place. And you see, historically, every civilization, they remember if they migrated ever from their homeland. Like Iranians, Avesta say that they migrated from India. I've read a few literature from the Central American ancient empires like Jet and Incas. They also have the tradition that they migrated from some other places, and that was not their homeland. In our case,
the entire idea of Israel born out of
yes.
it. Next year in Jerusalem. So Jerusalem was the idea that.
No, but in our case, sir, we are always saying that no, this is our Punya Bhumi, Jan Bhumi, Karma Bhumi, everything. We never came from our. This is our plane. Our entire literature talks about that. And we have no memory of outside, or we are told no, you came from outside. And this again is a very.
And it talks about Himalayas to Indian Ocean.
Yes. Yes, yeah, absolutely. And all our literature talks about from Puranas to Vedas, everything. So my point is, this doesn't see. I remember one historian, very famous historian, talking about Vedic period people. He said, Vedic people probably didn't eat salt in their food, and then the logic they give was that it's not mentioned in Rig Veda. Was it the job of Rig Veda people to mention salt? Was it some culinary work? My point is, this is the level of
and most of the people who do not understand Sanskrit, they want to interpret Veda, and they proudly say that we don't know Sanskrit.
Yeah.
Because perhaps they may be looking for either namak or salt, and they would not be no lavana.
True, very true, sir. So yeah, I think, if you want to interpret, I think the best person to read is like what Sri Aurobindo had done, and he understood the language, he understood the culture. You have to also understand the culture. Then only you can do that. And look at his interpretation and look at the interpretation of these historians. You say that there's so many loopholes. It just appears.
Another important dimension that you have dealt with in your chapter on epics and empires is about the way Indian great. One of the biggest harm that historians have done to our collective memory is creating doubt about our glory about Bharat and glory about our historical achievements. So you have mentioned, and you have actually taken the references of not just Ramayana, Mahabharata, but also Puranas to explain and understand the role of various dynasties over the period of time. Why is it so important to talk about Rashtrakutas and Pallavas and Cholas and these various dynasties, and why they were sidelined or whitewashed in Indian narration?
So there is a very oft used, in fact, sometimes it's used also quote in Sanskrit. We say that till the time lions don't start writing their history, hunt will always be glorified. That's exactly happened with us. Our history till date, our itihasa till date is not our. It is outsiders. Till date. So that's why you find the long literature on Sultanate period, while the reality just two sultans were of some eminence, where you can talk something about. One was Alauddin Khilji, and another was Muhammad Tughlaq. Rest other were some third, fourth sultans. No one cared about them. But
they never had a control beyond Vindhyas.
Yeah, not India, even UP.
UP.
Even UP was questionable. See, that's what I mentioned. Classical example I give Balban for example. Balban starts his career from Delhi. So our entire Hindu has completely surrounded it, Delhi. So he started winning, and that's why you see Balban has cleared a lot of jungles. Who used to live in jungles? Our own people, and that's why later some of them become tribes and all these things after long periods and everything. So he's one. By the end of his term, when he would die, he lost everything, and that was the case with most sultans, even Mughals, till Akbar came. And till Mughals kind of followed Akbar's policies, very smart policy of taking the help, co-opting a part of Hindus. It worked for them. But the day Aurangzeb left, by the time Aurangzeb died in 707 AD, it was all over. He himself claimed that he had made a mistake. So the point is, till the time we don't talk about our own heroes, it is not our history, and that's what we have been told. Our history has been all about. First, he said that this is a barren land. And it's kind of, or maybe it's a platform where people came in different eras and just devoted here. So first came Aryans, then came all these Central Asian tribes, then came Muslims, then came Europeans, and in future I don't know who will come. So and this place is nothing of his own. So this was one thing. And second story for
bulbule hai
yes,
iski gulsita hamara kind
so we aayenge. And the second myth they created was that anybody and everybody who came, they just came and destroyed and took over. There was nothing. So this entire history for us.
This is a typical British colonial narration to justify their rule.
So and our historian took it to a different level. They were weaponized it in a way. So our history jumps from after Guptas, glorious Guptas. Our history will suddenly jump to Muhammad Qasim and then Ghazni and Ghori, and then the slave dynasty comes. In between, so many glorious empires came into this country. Like what I mentioned in the book, that our golden period doesn't end with Guptas. Some of our national historians also make a mistake here. They believe that Guptas were kind of the apex. No, I think Cholas were the apex of our glories. We need to see what Cholas have done. It has not done in the world history till British could do. Of winning at naval victory in
terms of footprints and global influence.
What Chola could do was unprecedented at that time.
No, in terms of governance, for that matter, Vijayanagara is also glorious.
No, sir, even the governance of Cholas.
Most of the temples
today we talk about that this Panchayati Raj. The system was already there in Cholas, and kind of accountability was there. Like if I am the member of that assembly Chola, my brother will not be part of it, my son will not be part of it. So this is great, and today we talk about it, they have already done
real democracy and not dynasty.
Yes, exactly. It was already there, so we don't talk about that. And not just Cholas, Karkotas in North, amazing dynasty. They're not even footnotes of most books. I hardly knew when I started reading about them, and they were a great dynasty. And we get so mesmerized by Alexander. And there was a Karkota ruler about which I mentioned quite in detail, Lalita Aditya. And he was not just a conqueror, he was never defeated in his life. And he went as far as today's China, in Xinjiang region, remained undefeated. He defeated the Tibetan Empire, which was most powerful at that time, more powerful than the so-called Chinese Empire. Chinese also refused to come to his help when he was fighting so he went all the way there. And the legend is that some people misguided him in the local area and pushed his army to Taklamakan desert, and there were no water, so it got perished. But the reality is that we have got people like we celebrate and glorify Alexander. Look at him. Alexander was just about war, and his administration was far more efficient.
And
even after
not just about war. See, I find this dichotomous that we call these people great. Alexander the Great, or even in Hindi we say Jo Jeeta Wahi Sikandar. But the person who actually got lost while reaching to the Indus, and while going back, there was even not his own soldiers who were ready to accompany him.
Exactly.
So how can
and just winning can't be the measurement of it. That's where I'm coming. For Lalita, for instance, he had also governed his state so well that when he was not in the empire for almost more than a decade, no one attacked it. And when he got completely vanished in the desert, no one knew what had happened to you. Still, no, his empire was safe. He managed it so well. He created a system of ministers and everything. It was safe for next 2 to 3 decades because of that. And not just that, the kind of temples he made. So we don't talk about him. We don't talk about, of course, some of them we talk about Vijayanagara Empire. But what about Ahoms? After Cholas, Ahom was the second longest running empire in the country. And what they did, no one had done. They defeated Aurangzeb at the prime or at his prime, even before Shivaji could do. They defeated 1761 AD. So, very interesting thing, while researching about Ahoms, I found, sir, we are often told that, our kings were, they used to live in silos. They didn't bother about each other. Apne mein khush rehte the wo. Now, here was one Ahom king who was asking his neighboring Raja of Kuch Bihar about Shivaji. He's asking, how is Shivaji fighting Mughals? He was very interested. He wanted to know nuances about how he is bringing forts and how he is, very lenient in army, running and guerrilla warfare. So, and look, it happened a decade before Ahoms could defeat Aurangzeb. See the links. They are such a great link. And now again, Shivaji got inspired by Maharana Pratap. We don't talk about that. We have completely, we kind of put everything in mind. We don't talk about them. We hardly talk about Ahoms. I'm sorry, not going to text you. Which is unfortunate.
True about which you have talked about Gaudas and Kalingas, exactly. And these are the kingdoms.
Yeah.
And see, another important dimension that you have brought in at few places in your book is the role of state. Our Itihasa was always about this cultural connectivity rather than just kingdoms.
Absolutely.
Kingdoms were facilitators. They were meant to protect from external aggression.
Like today we talk about maximum governance and minimum government. That was our Dharma.
That was our Dharma.
Yes, sir.
So, why this dharmic idea and how this modern state, the idea of modern state, which is more a European concept, just a 1648 Westphalian model, how it has, led to the distortion? Because many times what happens, we try to look Indian reality and try to fit it in the Western parameters of being a. So we were not a state. We were not a nation. Then who were we?
Who were we exactly?
So how do you find it? And why historians never tried to address this fundamental question that the Indian idea of dharma and rashtra are different from nation state and religion?
No, Asa, I think initially, at the time for independence, they were scholars, they were historians, they wanted to do it. Asim Das were there, many others were there. But unfortunately, happened after that kind of historians came into the whole, they wanted to deny the very idea of Bharat. For them, Bharat never existed. So they came with a conclusion. They had in mind that we have to. And
for them, India is a nation in the making.
Yeah. And only when they become communist, they will become a nation state. So, they already had objective in mind, and they started looking for facts accordingly. So very selectively they chose the fact. The reality is that I'll give an example when Alexander came to this country and he sent his own people to find out what is this country all about. And what he was told was, the idea of India was already there. The idea of history was there. And a dynasty going almost 6,000 years back, they were told, and people were told about that. People know each and everything from Kashmir to Kanyakumari at that time. And that was told by the historians of Alexander. So the idea of history, idea of India, idea of history, everything was there. I think we have been deliberately denied for reasons obviously that the kind of historiography that's promoted post independence. But if you look at history, it is always there. Our Puranas our Vedas Puranas talk about. And Uttaram, Samudasya, Himadasya, everywhere you find that this entire land south of Himalayas is Bharat.
You have written about this conversation, later exchange between Rajendra Prasad and
yes
on R.C. Majumdar. If people like R.C. Majumdar were there and there was an attempt, was it deliberately crushed, or people or the historians deliberately changed their colors to the tune of the dispensation?
I think it worked out both ways, I'll say. So what happens, sir, at the time of independence, as you mentioned, R.C. Majumdar ji reached out. He said, since Bharat has got independent now, it's time that this country gets history of its own. And he wrote a letter to Education Ministry in 1948, if I'm not wrong. And there was no reply. Abul Kalam Azad was the education minister. No reply. After 2 years, waiting for 2 years, then he wrote a letter to Rajendra Prasad ji. And then Rajendra Prasad ji was always keen that this would happen. So he immediately wrote back, oh, we should do that. And my hunch is that it was under his, this thing that, ultimately government set up a board, of which Archana was a member. Now, as fate would have it, the board, leading the board was a bureaucrat, and he was a Congress politician. He wanted history to be presented in certain ways. So, Archana writes that there are 3 major reasons why there was a tussle between him and the then government. One was 1857. That was 1957. Government of India at that time wanted to celebrate it in a big way, and government of India wanted to project it like a very great Hindu-Muslim unity kind of thing where they both fought together and everything. Archana had a different view on that, and I'm more on his side when I read 1857. For me, it appears a bit more green in the color, a bit more jihadi. But that
it was more reclaiming the Mughal rule.
Yes, exactly. So, but then the government,
though Nana Sahib Peshwa and they were very clear.
Yeah, there were people, and they got and they fought bravely. No denying that. Whether it's Rani Lakshmibai or Nana, even Bihar Kumar Singh, the people were there. But overall color was Islamic.
Balia and Faizabad remained, Islamic state even after 1857 was over. Till 1860 almost.
So this part, government of India wanted to deny, and they wanted to project a national resurgence and where Hindu-Muslim participate together. He said, this is not history. And you just can't create history out of nothing. So this was one. The second thing he always believed was that in the role of revolutionaries. He thought that, yes, of course, Gandhi had played his role, but revolutionary had a bigger role. Now, this created a lot of flutter in the Nehruvian ecosystem where they wanted to appropriate everything for themselves, which they did. They managed to do it for almost 7 decades. Now it's being questioned. The third was that, and which is kind of completely, and it would have really made life difficult for Asim Imdad, when he said that our freedom struggle is not just 200-year-old, it is 800-year-old. Now this Nehruvian ecosystem won't have created it. So then what happened that that board was dissolved, and a year or 2 years later, another board was made, and which were not even invited. One Mr. Tarachand was made the head of it, and who was a bureaucrat but very pro-Congress, and his history is still there, very pro-sanitized history where everything, where Ganga Jamni Tehzeeb ki nadiyan bahti thi ek saath. So that kind of history they created. So attempt was made at that time also, and but unfortunately, what happened post-independence, Nehruvian ecosystem was strong, but late 1960s, what happens? Indira Gandhi was a different ballgame. Indira Gandhi, I always believe that she had no ideological moorings. She was absolutely, astute politics. So that's why I see the first part from 1969 to 77. She is very progressive. Progressive in the sense I'm going quote unquote, I'm saying very leftist in the outlook. In the second term, she has realized the thing, and she has kind of turned her thing. She is pro Hindu in her outlook in the second avatar of her. So, whether she was successful or not, that's a debatable thing, but she tried to do that. And the first thing what happened that she bargained with communists. She needed the support. So political numbers she got with hers was a minority government. In the bargain, she leased out everything academic and cultural thing to them, and that's genuinely created, and that was the beginning of end of history, Bharat's history for me.
But I have last very important question. There is a legacy of people like Ram Swarup and Sitaram Goyal, and for that matter, people would like to put in Michael Dineno and Conrad Elst in that legacy. But still, they were never considered as so-called mainstream historians. They were always on the periphery.
No, but are we
Arun Shourie
are we still considered the mainstream? We are still. This book is still not mainstream.
That's why I'm asking. Whether you or before you Arun Shourie and Sopan Das Gupta, and now you, coming basically from career journalist writing on history, And this is always a problem with the people who wear the frames of socialism and secularism in history writing. That they always, oh, but he's not an historian. Oh, but he's not an academic.
Yeah.
How are you going to deal with this? Because this is a very important book. It's a a kind of step forward in at least creating curiosity among youth about what the real history of Bharat is. But this has been a problem.
I think it's a very important question, sir. And there are two parts of it. First part is why is there need for someone outside like me or others to come and write a book? Because our so-called real historians fail to do their job. They have not written history. They have written something. I look at the text. Today, you pick up a history book written by them, you're not able to read 10 pages out of it. It's jargon full of, the ideological jargons, economic things will be splattered. And they made it so difficult that, you just can't read. You just can't read it. Lose interest. You just can't read that. It's unreadable, most of the books. So, and that forced people like us to come. Please write nice books. We'll not come. We'll write some political stuff. That's part one of it. Now, the part two is, but who says that they are the historians? What is the criteria of being a historian? Now, that's the question we need to start asking. For me, the real historian was somebody like Dilna Sarkar. And his criteria, according to his criteria, if you are writing a history of medieval India, you need to know all the languages prevalent at that time. You need to go and see everything. Like, for instance, if you're writing Haldi Ghati ka battle, he, for record, went there. He sat on the ground, on the hill, and was watching and wondering, acha, Akbar's army came from here. Maharana Pratap's army was there. Okay, acha, yahan se chetak leke wo bhage. So he visualized, he did that much effort. Who in today's generation of so-called great historians have done that work? Romila Thapar, by that criteria, not even a historian, because he doesn't know Sanskrit. So is he a historian? Now, who decides the criteria of a historian? It is these people who decide themselves, and they have created it for themselves.
On the basis of left-right binary.
Exactly. But by that criteria, most of the people who claim to be the eminent historians are not historians at all. So who is the historian? I think we need to first question that. And I'm all for that. I think the ideal stage of historians should be what Dilna Sarkar placed. It should be there. And also the motive should be like that. That facts should be sacrosanct, whether you like it or dislike it. And I totally I adore him for that matter. Like when he wrote a history on Marathas, I wrote reports of that time. Marathas were very upset with his book. And when he wrote a history of Bengal, Bengalis were very upset. So this is what the real scholars say, please do that. Be my guest. But you don't do that. And so my point is, I think it's a very smart tactic. So a few people decide who is a historian and who is not a historian.
So, this is a very, very interesting way because there is much more in this book when Utpalji writes about the infidels and invaders and the whitewash by the white people and their mischiefs. So it is a very, very interesting narration. I would not, press him to disclose everything in this conversation. But this conversation was essentially meant to, get a basic idea behind the book and how this book has unfolded. So there is now a new lineup, coming in front, whether Sanjeev Sanyal trying something or Vikram Sampath doing some excellent work on Savarkar. So I believe that Utpal's work on Eminent Distorians and the way he is basically trying to decolonize India's history writing, and in that sense, this is a very, very important work. So thank you, Utpalji, for coming over and discussing about the book, and wonderful work where it starts as a journalist writing, but end up in a very, very, very rigorous academic work. So youth, especially who really want to understand Bharat, Itihasa of Bharat, and the problems in the so-called history writing of Bharat should grab this book and at least have try to understand the perspective, the perspective from which we can see Bharat. I hope you would enjoy this conversation in this episode of Meet the Author, and also grab the book Eminent Distorian by Utpal Kumar. Namaste.